Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to RPH Allies PharmTech 360 show. We're joined today with our guest, Jeremy Sasser. Many of you know him from the National Healthcare Association. We're here to discuss his early career pivots, which are so relative to many of our technicians. I'm going to start with the RPH Ally video intro, and then we will begin the conversation. I may have hit the wrong button. I can't seem to get the video to go. All right, we're going to continue with our conversation. Jeremy, we're happy to have you today. You've seen technicians in a lot of different spaces. We want to hear from you. How did your career start? What was it like as a pharmacy technician? What did you see and what motivated you to begin to take some next steps?
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for having me. I love watching this on Saturday mornings. So this is a great show to bring to everybody. But you know, I fell into pharmacy somewhat serendipitously at the age of 16, still a high school student in my small town in Arizona. It wasn't a position that I had ever really considered. But at that time, I was lucky enough to have a pharmacy manager and a staff pharmacist that were really great at showing me, you know, how to be a pharmacy technician, teaching me a lot of the science behind pharmacy and pharmacy practice. At that time, you know, I knew that I wanted to pursue a degree in the science field. So after working there for a few years, it was a great transition down to Tucson, Arizona, where I was a student at the University of Arizona. Got my degree in physiology from there. And, you know, I was lucky enough to sidestep the service type industry jobs that so many students often have to do. So as I went through college, you know, really combining what I was learning in the classroom and making those connections to, you know, the types of things that I was doing in pharmacy, I think that really fired me up and inspired me to continue down that journey after college. So I stayed with Albertsons, and after graduating, I took more of a full-time position as a pharmacy technician at a pharmacy in West Tucson, and really it was there that I really wanted to push the envelope in terms of growth. There wasn't a defined career ladder at that time really within the organization for pharmacy technicians. There certainly weren't any leadership type positions that Albertsons had at that time. Kind of the pinnacle at that time was being the lead technician at a particular store, which I was. But I wanted to do more. And really it started at the store level with, you know, seeking out a meeting with my pharmacy manager and saying, hey, you know, I think that there are some gaps here. I think there are some ways that we can better run this pharmacy in terms of a business, and I'd like to be a part of that. Would you allow me to take over some of the paperwork, tracking numbers, things like that, doing more inventory management? And he was great about it. It's one of those things, I think a lot of folks in the organization, you know, they just, it's not that they wouldn't allow a technician to do it. It's just nobody ever thought about it. And unfortunately, I think back then, technicians, you know, they really weren't great at self-advocacy, right? And it's gotten a lot better since then, but you really have to advocate for yourself and your skills and really ask to take on more at times, because it's not always going to be presented to you. And it certainly wasn't for me at that time. So Jeremy, I took on a little bit more responsibility at the store and then kind of grew from there.
I was going to say, what I think I hear you saying is you're looking at and identifying tasks that you can do that are comfortable for you, correct?
Yeah, or and not only necessarily comfortable, because oftentimes we have to get out of our comfort zone to really grow, but
Mm-hmm.
it's having enough knowledge to recognize that there's a gap or a shortcoming in some process, and really thinking about how can I improve upon that process and really help to make it a little bit more successful. At that time, a big issue for us was inventory. I wasn't a part of doing inventories up to that point, but I knew that, we had a huge amount of inventory, right? A lot of stuff that we just weren't moving. So I really took on that process and basically asked my pharmacy manager if I could own that process, if you'd give me the opportunity to own it, and that includes, doing the reverse distribution stuff, really tracking ROP, ROQs, really kind of taking a tighter stance on what we're ordering on a nightly basis from our wholesaler and things like that. And obviously making sure that we're getting in the medications that were preferred medications. All of these things kind of help to accumulate our overall inventory turnover rate. And, within a few inventories, we were able to get it, down quite low. We had what we needed on hand for the most part, but we didn't have excess. And, we were having a lot of turnover. So that was kind of the first step for me, was in that particular store, owning that process.
That is great. So when you say we, how many technicians were part of the team to implement that improvement?
On a full-time 40-hour a week basis, there were probably 3 of us consistently doing 40 hours. And then, of course, we had, being in a college town with the School of Pharmacy, we had a few interns, pharmacy interns, who were pharmacy students, like in the evenings and things like that. And then we had some part-time techs. So, that's a great point. Oftentimes, I wasn't working, maybe sometimes at all, with some of the staff, because I was more of a 8 to 5, and they may be evenings or something like that. So, it was really communicating both verbally and in written form to kind of set together some goals, some standards and things like that. Cause it really, took everybody. I can't roll into the pharmacy, every Saturday and Sunday at closing and do the order for them, or submit the order at night, things like that. So it definitely took a group effort. It just took somebody to really own it and set those goals and standards and provide some direction that we could all rally behind.
So that sounds like it was an initial step. How many pivots do you think you made while at Albertsons total?
So from there, I had, my next opportunity really came to be out of the store more and do some more behind the scenes work, particularly with our software vendor at the time, who was PDX. So this was a situation where now I had to go beyond my pharmacy manager, and I started with my district pharmacy manager, and that unfortunately was really an uphill battle. He's overseeing many stores. He's got a lot going on. I realize, and I'm over here, raising my hand, and just pestering him. I think I can do some more. I think I can do some more. And finally, it actually caught the attention of a regional pharmacy manager that was above him. And she really took the reins at that point. And that's when I was really able to kind of take off. So for our Southwest division in Arizona, I started being kind of the liaison between the Albertsons business and the pharmacies and our software vendor, because there's kind of like a level of support there that needs to exist in the middle, that is somebody who's poised to make more of the business type decisions when there are issues with the software or whatever the case may be. So I kind of stepped in.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you, for our listeners to catch, is you started out in a field that wasn't technician based, but you went into the role of a pharmacy technician, and then you identified some efficiencies from a business sense for pharmacy practice, not the patient care side, but the business side, performed at the local level at your specific location,
Mhm.
got the attention at district, impacted district, went on to region. Is that an accurate description?
Well, I kind of jumped over the district and just kind of went into more of a regional Southwest region type of position.
Okay. Was that multiple states?
Yes,
Okay.
that
Okay.
was at that time is Albertsons LLC. So they really only had stores in the southernmost states. So we're talking New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, those areas. So and that was really my first foray into things like business travel, having to go to Dallas, Fort Worth, where PDX was located, and working directly with their teams, and traveling to different training spots, because that was kind of the next iteration. Once I really understood the ins and outs of the back end of the software, and you need somebody to connect the dots from what's going on in the background with the software to what is the everyday workflow actually going on in a pharmacy. And so that was kind of where I fit into that. So once I really locked that down, they asked if I would start doing new associate training. So any of our new pharmacists, new pharmacy technicians, we would have training classes specifically on the software, on our business, and things like that. And we had classrooms in both Arizona and Texas. So I kind of went back and forth whenever was needed to train new associates on the software. And then
So at some level, if 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 you were working at regional, were you also, and you were working with the software vendor that support in a way that supported workflow and inventory management, does that mean you were really working at a national level? Did your efforts have a national impact?
a national level in terms of Albertson's footprint at that time.
Okay, I
Albertson's
think that's
LLC
important
at
to
that time, we
understand.
had about 180 pharmacies, and it was the southern states: Florida, Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, Colorado. We didn't have anything in California at that time, nothing in any of the other states. All of those Albertsons were under a different ownership by a company called Super Value at that time.
Okay.
So once I started training, I was doing the training at multiple locations to support all of the pharmacies. Same with software. And again, it was the next step, next iteration after that. I was successful at that. And I met with vice president of Albertsons LLC at that time. And he asked if I would be willing to relocate from Arizona to Boise, Idaho, where they were located, just so that I could have the opportunity to work a little bit more shoulder to shoulder with the leadership, vice presidents, directors, and things like that, to really, again, bridge the connection between, daily operations and workflow and what was going on at a corporate level.
So here's what this is what I'm hearing, is that we as pharmacy technicians have had such a strong messaging process that said, count and pour, count and pour, count and pour. Now the messaging is, you can engage with areas of patient care, responsibilities with patient care. You can engage with the patients directly. What I'm hearing from you, and I think what we're seeing alongside that, is you were part of the movement when technology was coming in and helping the process that would eventually give pharmacists and technicians the time opportunity for direct patient care. And so what I'm also hearing is, and I hope our listeners are hearing this, technician is not the destination, and it's not the only source of education or training. It is an area of professional performance. It still takes learning from maybe a 360 view. You're learning KPIs, you're learning how software runs, you're learning more about the workflow and efficiencies, human engineering. And we're learning too about the automated systems for fill right now. So as you look back on those years at Albertsons, and as you look forward, tell me, what do you see the future is for pharmacy technicians? What do they need to think about as they pivot forward in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, the future is bright. I mean, even considering how far we've come from, the time that I first started working in a corporate position, I will say I'm a firm believer in, whatever your interest is in pharmacy, there's probably a position out there that could utilize your efforts, whether that's, being more of a pharmacy informaticist, if you're more into data and analytics. And make no mistake, all of it at some level certainly affects direct patient care.
Yes.
Even when I'm going through hundreds of claims and I'm finding claims that were billed incorrectly, or where we are reimbursed at a loss of $800 and we're trying to fix that, getting orphan drugs into the hands of the people who need it. Oftentimes that was the type of assistance that I would provide stores at a local level. So even though I'm not, standing there in the pharmacy looking at the whites of the eyes of the patients, it was definitely still very impactful on making sure they got what they needed. But it's continuing to push the envelope and really advocate for ourselves, locally, at the state level, at the national level. Obviously what's happened in the past few years with immunizing, point of care testing, we've shown that pharmacy technicians with the appropriate training can safely do these activities and be very effective at it. And when you consider a typical pharmacy who's staffing one pharmacist, at a time, whether that's a 12-hour shift or there's some sort of overlap, it just makes a lot more sense to have more people back behind the counter in the form of pharmacy technicians that can help out with some of these things like immunizations and point of care testing. And, it's not just, to your point, pour and count and throw them in a bottle anymore, or slap a label on it, right? We always hear that from patients. Can't you just throw a label on it? There's so much more to it than that. And all of those services, being able to efficiently provide those services, I mean, they're also bringing in alternate revenue streams to the pharmacy, and particularly I think about independent pharmacies and remaining solvent and successful. You really have to look at ways to get revenue beyond reimbursement, because we know that the reimbursement is not where you're going to be making a lot of your money.
Not the medication dispensing,
right?
The reimbursement for medication dispensing.
Right. Excuse me. Right.
Yes. And billing is going to be a really strong growth area, because it is the pharmacy benefit billing and the medical benefit billing. Both of these are merging. They're merging in the pharmacy and the doctor's office. So
absolutely. Yeah. My last position with Albertsons was managing specialty pharmacy. And that's where I really got into it. A lot of high dollar injectable medications were being kicked over to a patient's medical benefit. And it was kind of like looking around like, okay, who can do this? And it was definitely a shortcoming. So
that's right. Jeremy, I think you've given us some great examples, and you've had an interesting early career. We are appreciative of you sharing this information. I hope all of our listeners understand this is a start. Wherever you are, you can pivot forward, take another step. Do not be discouraged. Do not bolt. There's some really exciting things coming forward in pharmacy for every single person who participates. We are no longer defined by our title, technician or pharmacist. There's so much more happening. So with that, we will be back again next Saturday, April 22nd, and we have a guest, Beth Shelton. She's a technician from Florida who has pivoted and moved into some special areas of customer patient engagement. We're looking forward to hearing from her. Jeremy, we wish you the best this coming week. All of our listeners, we wish you a great week, and we'll see you next Saturday.
Thank you. And if I could just add one last thing real quick. Yes. Anybody who sees this broadcast, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, connect. We only get stronger by our network. Let's work together, advocate, So yeah, please reach out.
Well, and register on RPH Ally, because RPH Ally is the social media platform for pharmacy. So
yep, absolutely.
Very targeted listeners and connections, and we've got learning resources coming. We've got technician influencers who are developing content to be made available just for.
It's my son.
I gathered. Great view. We're going to have learning resources coming up on RPH Ally, both accredited and non-accredited for CE, but we are excited about the future. So everyone, take care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jeremy. Bye-bye.